More than 1,000 demonstrators on Tuesday gathered in central Moscow for a second evening of protests. The crowds turned out despite the Kremlin's ban on unapproved rallies. Thousands of troops and army trucks met the protesters, and at least 250 people were arrested. Demonstrators claimed Sunday's parliamentary election was fraudulent, even though the results showed a big fall in support for the pro-Putin United Russia Party. But how will the outcome of the Russian election change the political and business climate in the country? Joining me now to talk about it are Nicu Popescu, Research Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, and Stefan Wagstill, the FT's Emerging Markets Editor. We saw a big fall in United Russia's support on Sunday to below 50% of the vote. Nicu, let me ask you first, do you think this poses any threat at all to Mr. Putin's own plans to return as president next March?
Well, I don't think it poses immediate threats to Putin, but it's probably the beginning of a mid to long-term erosion of support for Putin and for Единая Россия. So it shouldn't affect him in March, but over a period of 5-6 years, I think this trend will be confirmed, and governing and controlling Russia in the way they did will be more and more difficult and more tense.
What about the implications for Dmitry Medvedev, Stefan? He was the head of United Russia's list in these elections. Do you think there's a possibility he could become the fall guy for the result?
I think it's an option. I think the next few weeks will be quite nervous times for the Kremlin and the people working in and around it as they try to assess what's happened and prepare for those presidential polls. I think that if Putin decided that the best way to bump up his popularity was to drop Medvedev, I don't think he'd hesitate about it at all.
But in many ways, I think Medvedev now has had his double dip. With the September giving up the fight for presidency, he became for his friends the president who lost the presidency. And now for his intra-Kremlin rivals, he became the president who lost the Duma elections. So I think in many ways now he'll be much more cornered in the Russian political system.
How should the Kremlin respond to this very poor result in the parliamentary election?
Well, there's two theoretical ways to respond. One is to become much tougher, decide that this relatively low result was because there was not enough administrative pressure, there was not enough control in the system, and the obvious response would be to re-centralize things, and that Medvedev's modernization talk and all this flirting with the middle classes and the internet was the wrong way to do. So instinctively, this could be one of the by default response. The other one, perhaps more logical speaking, if we speak about it in London, would be to try to be more inclusive, not least of some of the parliamentary parties. Depending on Putin's results in the March elections, we'll see what the new strategy is in approximately half a year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that you have around Putin a group of people who came to power and to great wealth with him, and these people's prime interest is to remain in power with access to the money that state companies and other things can generate. And these people are still quite young, and they're determined to stay put for a very long time. They can't leave because they're scared of what might happen afterwards, and like many other elites, they enjoy their current position. So I think on balance, they're more likely to slide towards conservative and even repressive measures than the opposite.
Do you think repressive measures could actually succeed in Russia today? It's a very different society from what it was 11 years ago when he first came to the presidency. It's a richer society, a lot more young people who've travelled abroad, seen different systems. Surely a clampdown is not going to work in Russia today, is it?
I hope not, but I think the issue is whether Putin will test that theory, whether he will actually go to the point or not. I don't think he rushed into it and won't do it unless he has to.
How do you think investors should look at what's happened in Russia? Obviously, it's a confusing time at the moment, given the uncertainty over what might happen. What sort of view should investors take of Russia right now, Nicu, would you say?
Many of the Western investors would rather stick to the devil they know, rather than try and advocate or support a sustainable change of a system where you'd have less corruption and more checks and balances.
But Stefan, it's not really the devil you know in Russia anymore, is it? Because we're now looking at a different political landscape. Whichever way you look at it, something changed on Sunday. How do you think investors should play the Russia story right now?
I think they should be more cautious than they have been so far. But I agree with Niku that they're most likely to stick with what they know than to go looking for alternatives, which at this stage in the game would simply amount to looking for trouble. If we're seeing something playing out which might lead to a more plural, I don't say democratic, but more plural system, we're a long way from that. And I can't see any investor wanting to gamble on that in advance. And the other thing to bear in mind is, of course, what are Russia's peers in terms of investment destinations? If you're looking at oil and gas countries, as Niku says, Russia's not too bad if you compare it with investing in the likes of Nigeria or parts of the Middle East.
But I think the other twist to this story is not just what Western investors are doing in Russia, but also what very rich Russians are doing. And actually what they've been doing in the last year was taking money away.
Exactly, we've seen a big capital flight.
Exactly, there's
Could
been a huge...
Could that increase as a result of this parliamentary poll?
You see actually very rich Russians trying to basically safeguard their money out of Russia. So part of the problem is that Western investors are happy to go in, but actually a lot of the Russians are taking their money out because they think it's more secure to keep them in Switzerland or Luxembourg rather than in Russia. And they are not investing as much in Russia as they should or they would be expected to.
I think we'll see the outflows until at least next summer, well after the elections, and then some people might judge that it's an appropriate time to come back or at least stop sending so much money abroad.
Okay. We'll have to leave it there. Many thanks indeed to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.